Hello. As already kindly introduced, I am Arina Melse. I will speak today about the Human Rights Guide, a human rights education and civic education platform that has grown from Latvian initiative to a Europe-wide effort. I am representing today here the Baltic Human Rights Society, which is the founder, the author, and the driving force behind this Human Rights Guide. But we have many, many partners. And I was asked to also say a few words about our organization. We are a non-governmental organization, Latvia-based, that was founded in 2012 to promote human rights protection, human rights development in Latvia. Of course, we had human rights organizations here already, but we felt that many organizations work very reactively. They are reacting to human rights problems, and we felt that there is a need for a more preventative approach. And we were looking at human rights education and civic education as a solution to that. And at that time, when we started, human rights education was only on the rise, thanks to the UN Human Rights Education World Program, which had recently started. And at that time, many people did not really think so much about human rights education. When we said we are working with this topic, they said, "You mean the human right to education?" And we said, no, we actually want to promote and popularize human rights education, the right to know human rights, to understand your human rights. And that is virtually has been our lion's share of our focus has been human rights education, developing materials and tools for general public, for different professional groups. We also engage in advocacy in this area to get attention to human rights education as a structural implementation, for example, for public officials as a state-led, state-owned initiative, that it wouldn't only come from the ground up, from the non-governmental sector. We have also engaged in the last 5 years in development cooperation efforts, where we are bringing our human rights programs to Eastern Partnership and other donor recipient countries. But we also pay attention to generally human rights in substance, and we engage in research and consultancy pretty much in any area of human rights where there are issues, and a lot of our effort goes into supporting EU Fundamental Rights Agency as a national independent expert in furnishing them with a lot of information, in our case, about Latvia. About the Human Rights Guide. The idea of the Human Rights Guide was born virtually at the same time as our organization. And when we started to look into the human rights education efforts, we realized that in fact there isn't a resource where people can very easily turn to and in simple terms understand their human rights. There was also nothing in one place. And thus we resolved to create something which would serve as a very well-known go-to platform for human rights information, for understanding whether you have a problem and to learn more about this problem. Often people don't even know if they have entered a situation where you have a problem. They just think they have a normal problem, a social problem. Sometimes people think that they have a human rights problem, but they actually just have a simple social problem that they can solve quite easily. To learn more about the contents about this problem, if there is a problem, and very importantly, to understand where to turn, how to solve your problem, maybe to nip it in the bud, or already engage with more serious, more difficult mechanisms. And we also understood if we are going to educate general public, if we are going to educate people, we need also well-informed and educated rights providers, which are public sector employees, different social workers, in one word, professionals who will be receiving and hearing the claims so that they are actually understood. So what are our basic principles? Why can I make a claim that we have created a go-to and simple to understand platform? Our main idea is that we in fact introduce human rights through themes or through simple daily situations that anyone can identify with. Our experience was, we were mostly lawyers, and our experience was that human rights are mostly explained through quite difficult legal terms, through the catalogs that are included in international human rights conventions, which are many. And not only normal people, but even professionals often cannot link those legalistic terms to real everyday situations. They have to quite labor to decipher how does this situation translate into human rights. And that's our basic principle, how to guide people from the position that they are in and that they understand. We also understood at that moment that in fact to be accurate, because it is at the end of the day about legal information about rights, there will be quite a volume of information. But we can't smother people with volume of information. So how to get people easily, lead them easily to the information they exactly need, that they do not have to read like a large textbook like in a university, because we are talking about a normal everyday person. We don't know if they have gone to the university. We don't know anything, but they all need to know their rights. So we immediately understood, and that goes together with today's theme, that we need to go digital, because only with digital solutions we can actually provide a large volume of information in one place, but in fact facilitate through smart navigations and visual solutions that people can very easily arrive only to the information that they need. Be it a situation that you have a sanitary problem in closed institution, be it a situation that you've seen a possibly discriminatory employment ad. Do you have a noise pollution in your neighborhood? Those are the questions that people are looking for. And in fact, if they search just on Google, they will most likely land on our resource because it has become so big that it's very high on the search list. And you can actually arrive exactly to your question without reading from page 1 to page 60 about all other problems before you find your problem. We also offer it in multilingual format. It's not only because we have many partners and then in each partner country you have it in their language, but we are also looking at relevant minority languages in each of the countries where the Human Rights Guide currently exists. And in terms of results, Human Rights Guide is permanent. It has been permanently online, freely accessible to everyone from day one it was launched, which was in Latvia in 2016, and consequently in 12 different countries. I will speak about that in a minute. And it has never been offline. It has been supplemented and only growing since that moment. So it's always there, day and night. Our target groups, as you can already understand from what I said, is the society at large, everyone, every person. But we also found it important to provide resources for professionals, because many people, in fact, when they do work with people with social issues, intertwined with all kinds of human rights aspects. When you come in contact with a person, you are already wiggling on that edge of entering a human rights domain. So everyone needs to understand, when carrying out their professional duties, human rights aspects. And many people are not educated lawyers, they're not educated human rights lawyers. So also social workers, law enforcement, even judiciary who are lawyers still need to understand different angles, different aspects of human rights. And later we realized, because our resource was so simple and so beautiful, that in fact we started to notice that also education institutions like universities, law programs, but also high schools, they include our resource in their curriculum. That was not our intention, but we realized that because there is nothing else, they will be using this. So we have started catering also to them. And when I'll speak in a second about the features, I will say what we have included more to support the educators and the learners. A little bit about the usage. Since our reception, we have had more than 2.5 million visitors, users of the platform. In Latvia, we have approximately 15,000 monthly users, which translates into around 200,000 users a year. If you know that our country is smaller than 2 million inhabitants, then you will understand that that's not a little, that's quite a lot. And these are just examples. Latvia, Lithuania, also good digits. I'm giving examples from the oldest guides that exist the longest online. We have also a human rights guide in France, which is a very large country. But a lot in the usership is dependent on the dissemination. So when the guide is new, you need to work quite hard to disseminate that the guide would reach the population. Our features is obviously the themes, the situations from which the people will arrive learning about the rights. That's our largest basic feature. But when we realized that the guide is more and more being used for educative purposes, we also felt the need to include simple rights explainers. So you can also go from the rights perspective if you want to. We have a lot of case law. Those are the cases from courts, national courts and international courts, explaining different human rights aspects. This is particularly important for the professionals so that they can understand where the legs grow of certain understanding, certain interpretation of rights. For the most important cases, we have created our own unique summaries in very simple terms, describing the situation almost like an action or something, so that people actually would read it, they would be interested in it, and they would not have to go through a 50-page judgment from the European court or so, which entails a lot of aspects, not just the one that you need. And if we have explained a specific problem, we provide the angle of the case in a summary exactly about this issue. And we also have created tests which are interesting, not just for educators and learners, but also for normal people, because sometimes they just want to know what they know in advance and what they know afterwards. And it's fun to take those tests. You can also try. Themes. The guide currently contains, the largest guides contain 21 themes. You can see that some of the themes going along with the theme of this conference are exactly about active participation, like civic participation, freedom of expression, also environment and climate change, which asks for a lot of action. But in fact, all of those themes are essentially, as they are substantively, but also how they are designed, are meant to bolster participation, because learning about your rights, defending your rights, or defending the rights of the others, or the societally important questions like environment, you do engage in participation, and you in fact do defend all the EU core values like democracy and human dignity and rule of law. So the EU values weave through essentially all of the topics that we are explaining and that are essentially our human rights. The Human Rights Guide has a large network. It has grown from Latvian and Baltic initiative to a Europe-wide and beyond effort. The blue circles indicate countries where the guide already exists. The oldest guides, the Baltic guides, already feature all of the themes. Other countries keep adding themes. The black circles are the countries and the organizations that have expressed strong interest to collaborate, and they want to implement the guide in their countries, and we are currently looking for funding, and hopefully soon the guides will also be available there. These are all partner organizations in the countries. They are the leading human rights organizations there. And yeah, we've had very, very good collaboration. How do we make sure that the guide arrives to the population is through our different dissemination and valorization efforts. We always come up with large-scale outdoor campaigns when the guide is launched in different countries. You can see some examples of what's been possible in different big cities. We also organize launch events where we either introduce on how to use the guide, or we organize topical launch events which centers around a certain issue that is relevant in that national context at the time, and we link it to the guide. We organize conferences about themes that are generally important. For example, before we were launching the environment and climate theme, we also organized a climate change and national remedies topical event in Riga. It was also coinciding with the European Court of Human Rights judgments, whether we can actually, through human rights angle, defend and stop or minimize the climate change. We also use the guide in different teaching events where we educate the professionals or the educators about human rights, and at the same time also teach them to use the guide in their professional duties. The guide also has been recognized by different, organizations. We have received the European Innovating Teaching Award this year. Last year we were awarded by the Ministry of Education and Science and the Education Development Agency, the Erasmus Project Quality Award, and we also have received the Latvian nomination for UNESCO Prize for Global Citizenship Education, where we are still awaiting the results. So we are very, very honored that this has been already seen by more globally how valuable this initiative is. And those are our kind supporters, both financial supporters and also moral supporters in our efforts, different ombudspersons, institutions, also different ministries from many of the guides' partner countries. So thank you very much for your attention.